we're going to supposedly have a guest a little around 7:30. He's going to come in, a young man, or not a young man, but a person, a local guy who's written a book in historical fiction. So
you got a guest?
Well, going from the future to the past.
Yes.
Andy Hopkins has written this book called In the Tall Pines.
Correct.
And my cousin Dan Dagenet was telling me about it and let me read his version, his copy, and I really said, geez, this would be an interesting story for the radio here.
So you're a local guy that wrote a book?
Yes, I'm from Claremont, yeah.
Okay.
And, I always wanted to write a book about the local area because I don't think much is written about the River Valley, the Connecticut River Valley. This is a history book back in 1765, but it's also an engaging story as well.
So is it a true story, or is it a...
It's a fictional battle at the fort at number 4 in Charlestown.
Wow.
But the characters are real.
Okay.
The characters are taken from historical accounts. We have Phineas Stevens from the fort, who was the commander of the siege of 1747. Benning Wentworth, our original colonial governor for 25 years, as well as the Green Mountain Boys are in there.
Ethan Allen.
Some Native American figures that nobody really knows about. Chief Greylock. There was Greylock's War in 1720, which was the closest war that ever came to here, really. He raided settlements and homesteads back then. And then we have Metalac, who was well known in northern New Hampshire. There's 2 mountains named after him. And he was more of a friend of the settlers.
Okay.
So we have the antithesis of Chief Greylock. And the battle is kind of a venue for me telling about little-known historical facts.
Okay. So now you're a historian? You studied up on this?
I started this in 2009 when I was getting my BA in American Studies at Granite State College. And I had it on and off the shelf for the longest time. And then I finally completed it in 2016. And I self-published it through Lulu.com and finally got it published in July of last year.
Through what? What was the website?
Lulu.com.
Okay.
I searched for a while. There's a lot of self-publishing sites out there, and I'd recommend anybody to self-publish rather than waiting for publishing companies who will put your book on the shelf for 2 years and maybe never get back to you.
Sure.
Now, it's called Fiddlehead Publishing. Is that you? Is that your... I mean, it's a clever name. I like that, Fiddleheads.
Well, that's me, yeah. I'm also known for selling fiddleheads in West Claremont. In the spring, I go out and pick fiddleheads around the rivers and the streams.
Well, one of the things I liked about the book was you sort of included not real historical names of, Phineas Stevens and Benning Wentworth, but you used surnames of original settlers, like Hubbards, Jarvises,
the Farnsworths were some of the first to settle in Charlestown.
Yeah.
The names are taken from real people who were at the fort at the time. And the Jarvis was a good name for my next coming book, which is going to be the sequel to this, which should lead history up through the 1850s. I chose In the Tall Pines because there are none of these pine trees left. There are virtually like 10 left in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And the Bradford Pines off 103 down in Bradford. I don't know if you've been down there, but there's about 10 of them down there.
Yeah.
But this state was covered with these trees.
Yeah.
But originally they were sold back to England for the king's masts because they were light wood and they made the ships faster so he could rule the world. But the settlers also need him to build houses. The king granted people land, but he told them he couldn't cut the trees to make houses. And if you can imagine living through the winter without a house because the king needed a mast for his ship.
Well, they would stamp or brand an arrow on a tree, and that meant you couldn't use that tree. That would be the king's tree, the king's arrow.
The king's broad arrow mark, yes.
Yeah. So
it was really one of the main causes of the Revolution. I mean, more than the Boston Tea Party, I think. I mean, settlers dressing up like Indians and dumping tea wouldn't mean as much to me as if you sold me a piece of land and told me I couldn't cut the trees.
Sure.
So the story starts out with this guy named,
Nathaniel Jarvis.
Nathaniel Jarvis and his wife and their little settlement in Claremont.
Claremont.
Right? In Claremont. And he starts out by telling us all about the trees, which was really interesting. And I had just kind of finished that Annie Proulx book on something about trees, and so I thought, oh, this is interesting. You know, it was like giving us information about all of that, and then the Indians attack. He's out working out in the field or someplace, and then the plot grows from there, and then they find out that there's this Abenakis coming from the Missisquoi up in the Swanton, Vermont area, and the others are coming down from the north, and they're going to reclaim. You know, they were going to reclaim the valley for the Abenaki Indian Nation, and that's what prompts this not minor, but you know, they kidnap his wife, and then he flees, and he goes to the fort, and
the Abenakis were forced north after the French and Indian War. Mm-hmm. But these two, Chief Greylock and Chief Medillac, mount up an attack to come back and then retake their land, which probably never would have happened because the Abenakis were wiped out by diseases more than anything else.
Oh.
The European diseases landed even before the Mayflower, from fishermen on the coast. Mm-hmm. In fact, before the Mayflower, the coast was so populated by Indians, they couldn't settle it. Plymouth was built on a deserted Indian village that was deserted because of disease. Yeah, the diseases really wiped out the Native Americans way back, and then our wars against them. Yeah. There's a lot. I don't know how far you've gotten into the book.
Oh, I finished it. I finished the whole book.
The whole thing?
Yeah, I did. I read it night and day. I read it night and day. I couldn't put it down. I couldn't put it down.
That's what people have told me. Once they start reading it, they can't really stop. But the Indian Wars are mentioned in there, which a lot of people don't know about the early Indian Wars.
I don't know anything about them.
King Philip's War. King Philip was Metacomet, who was the son of Squanto, actually, who befriended the Pilgrims.
Okay.
But the Pilgrims said they kept wanting more land and breaking treaties. Mm-hmm. And Metacomet, who was actually King Philip, dressed up like an Englishman. He was all wearing the English clothes and all that, and then they started a war against him because they kept breaking the treaties against the Native Americans. Yeah. So this is way back.
Oh, the early 1600s. I have a friend who's a Wampanoag Indian, from the I guess down on the Cape, and is it Nantucket or Martha's Vineyard? That there's two clumps left of them, of these Wampanoags, and their name was People of the First Light. That was what they were called, the People of the First Light, because they were so extended out into the the Cape that they were But anyways, this is so the plot takes place in 1760s, and if you look at when you're driving up and around, I don't know what year Newport was formed or chartered, but Clement was 1764 or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's a very good date because all these towns up and down the Connecticut River Valley were had just been chartered.
Well, that's when people started moving up here in masses, really. The towns were chartered in a 10-year period before by Benning Wentworth, who's one of the main characters in there. He named most of the towns in New Hampshire and Vermont. I think it was 124 towns, mostly after his friends back in England. And he considered the western border of his colony to be the Hudson River. So he chartered Vermont. Bennington was one of his towns. He named one after himself.
No.
And
so Bennington, Vermont was named by him.
Yes, all these towns were. But they were chartered, but they weren't really settled then. Yeah. Mostly they started settling in 1765 and after that.
So what happens is they know that there's going to be an attack, and the fort at Fort Number 4 in Charlestown would have been understaffed, undermanned. So they send for reinforcements, right?
Correct.
And one of them was over to Bennington to Ethan Allen. And why was Ethan Allen? I had forgotten all about that. What was
Ethan
his story?
Allen, a lot of people don't know the early history of him. No, he came up from Connecticut. He bought a grant from Benning Wentworth. And then the colony of New York was claiming his grants in Vermont, as well as New Hampshire was claiming the same land for the longest time. And Ethan was disrupting things so that he could keep the New Hampshire grants. And the New Hampshire grants are what Benning Wentworth gave out, but he was granting the same land New York was. Yeah. So it caused a lot of disruption, and actually that's what started Vermont becoming its own independent republic for a few years. Yeah. and then it came into a state.
And their claim, the New York claims, went all the way over to the Connecticut River. Like Westminster, Vermont, was contested because that was the New Yorkers said, no, this is just right south of Bellows Falls. I mean, so
those were actually the first shots of the American Revolution, the Westminster Massacre, when 2 British soldiers were killed by a group of settlers who were contesting their land grants. And Ethan Allen came over after the massacre and quelled things a bit, but it was a few days before Lexington, so it was really close. I mean, Lexington happened after Ethan Allen showed up, so. But actually, the first shots of the American Revolution were fired in Westminster, Vermont. So,
how come we don't know about this? Why is this not
that's
taught?
why I'm telling you all this stuff.
Why does why we always think of the Boston Massacre and
and the Boston Tea Party,
Bunker Hill and all that stuff.
Some of it though is because they dismiss it as a New York versus New Hampshire spat, as opposed to the King of England. So that's kind of how come it doesn't get the notoriety that it might otherwise get. But I mean, Ethan Allen was an interesting guy. I mean, so he comes over with his guys right in the nick of time. I mean, he comes in and then
the book is fiction.
The book is fiction,
but are we talking about real stuff?
The characters are real. And the characters have a connection to the Connecticut Valley and to Fort Number 4.
So Ethan Allen really did come here.
Ethan Allen did. Well, yeah, sure.
He came here for the Westminster Massacre.
Yeah.
Yes. But I had him coming to aid the fort just so I could explain about the New Hampshire grants, which a lot of people don't know this early history of our area and region. But
so the battle is fiction.
So the battle in the book is made up.
The battle is made up.
Okay.
That is made up. But all the characters. So what he's done is he's brought all these characters in and used it as a way of explaining. Like Benning Wentworth was this. If you see him, he was this very heavy, fat guy, and he supposedly had ripped off a lot of. He was not the cleanest guy in the world. In that.
No.
It was like $1 for the king, $1 for me, $1 for the king.
Pretty much. He got rich while everybody was struggling to survive.
Yeah.
He used to drive around in a purple cloak carriage, and he was not only the governor of the colony of New Hampshire, but he was also king surveyor of the woods. So he owned the land and the trees. And then he told you couldn't cut the trees. And he was
the royal governor for a long time.
25 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he took on a certain aura.
I think people back then liked it because they were used to a king.
Oh, sure.
They were used to having a king to bow down to and all that.
Yeah.
And
now, who was he before he was the governor?
He was appointed by King George.
But was he a nobleman?
No, well, he was from some minor aristocracy. There was some kind of connection there. He had connections in England.
Okay.
And so, he was named the royal governor of this little colony or province. And I had forgotten that they called them provinces, but they were, in our eyes, we call them colonies. But in I guess it was originally the province of
New Hampshire.
Yeah. So he was named as the governor, and he kept the job for 25 years. Once he got it, he didn't let go.
Governor for life.
Yeah.
He retired in '65, and then I think his son took over. John Wentworth was. Yeah. So it was kind of like an aristocracy, as Ray was saying.
And they were related or connected to somebody in England. That was his wife really like 25 years younger than him? I mean,
actually,
I didn't know if that was true.
It was, yes. Benning Wentworth's wife was 22, and he was 65.
Wow.
It was his second wife.
Oh.
Benning also held the record for broken windows at Harvard for the longest time.
Broken windows? What did he broke windows? I mean,
at Harvard when he was in school.
Oh.
Yeah, he was he was a real interesting character. And,
now, you gave an awful lot of information about Abenakis. Where did you learn that?
Again, I studied it, and I've been in contact with the Abenakis recently through my Facebook page in the Tall Pines, and I've joined their closed group, the Wabanaki, and there's a name of several other tribes after it. They've really been overlooked in this area. They actually did own the land. but the state of Vermont didn't recognize them until 2012.
I was going to say, I thought they weren't acknowledged as a real tribe.
I believe they are. Howard Dean wouldn't acknowledge them in 2004 because he was worried about a casino. And they're still not acknowledged in the state of New Hampshire, even though they were here for several thousand years.
Yeah.
I mean, their history goes way back before ours, actually, because Christ was born 2,000 years ago. So the Abenaki are 5,000 years older than that. But still, the state doesn't recognize them. Probably for the same reason they don't want a casino or something in the state.
But you use the where the bridge is that goes into Windsor. I mean, to Ascutney, from Claremont to Ascutney. Right there at that spot, or right around there, was an old Abenaki settlement, Indian settlement. And Professor Sargent, in the 60s, had found this, and they held up the new bridge for a while just so that he could do archaeological digs and so forth. And you worked that into you worked that the Indians, the Abenakis, meet at where the Sugar River and the Connecticut meet
under that bridge.
Yeah, and that's where that was this old Indian settlement. And I thought, wow, how did he know about that? And
Sargent did digs back there before they built the bridge.
Yeah,
and he tried to get the stuff out, but that was a great fishing spot where the Sugar River goes into the Connecticut. And there was a Sokwaki was the sub-tribe of the Abenaki that lived there. That was the Abenaki tribe that was in Claremont and the surrounding area. So what I've done, I pulled the Sokwaki tribe as well as the Cowasuck tribe from northern New Hampshire and the Missisquoi, which is at the northern end of Lake Champlain.
Okay.
Greylock was from Missisquoi, and Metalak came from the Cowasuck tribe. He was known as the last of Androscoggins. The time period's a little different on these because Greylock was back in the 1720s, and Metalak died in 1853. But there are two mountains named after him, one in Maine, one in New Hampshire, and there's brooks and ponds and everything named after Metalak. He was friends with a couple New Hampshire governors, I believe, as well. So a lot of little-known facts that I was trying to get out there for local people who don't know about it.
That's kind of an amazing thing, is to be able to bring that in to this. So I mean, and to think that you're just a local guy who sat down one day, and I was telling Steve, he said, he just sat and started writing this book, and it's one of three. It's a trilogy that you're thinking of.
Yes,
right?
there's two more planned. Yes.
What are the other two going to deal with?
Well, right through, as we're going to jump ahead a little bit from 1765 through that period from 1809 up to 1850. Doing this first book first, because I ran into so much material about these early people. I planned to go right up to 1850 with one book, but I had so much stuff in here about early history that no one in the area really knows about. And I've already done most of the research for the second book, and it's just a matter of getting it on paper. But the last 6 months I've been spending so much time promoting this book, I haven't really gotten too far into it. But
so what have you been doing to promote this? This is interesting.
Well, I have this book in a lot of stores.
Yeah. So if somebody wanted to buy this book, where would they go to get it?
You can get it online on Lulu.com.
Lulu.
Or Amazon.
L-U-L-O.
L-U-L-U, yeah.
Lulu.
Or Amazon.com, or Barnes & Noble, or Ingram's. And locally, it's available. I have some copies at River Valley College, Violet's Book Exchange in Claremont, 100 Mile Market in Claremont, 12% Solution in Cornish, and a lot of bookstores, Village Square Bookseller, the Norwich Bookshop in Norwich, Vermont, Morgan Hill Bookstore, New London, Warner Bookends in Warner, Yankee Bookstop in Woodstock, the Galaxy Bookshop in Hardwick, Vermont, all three Toadstool Bookshops in Keene, Peterborough, and Milford, Bridgeside Books, Bear Pond Books in Stowe, Flying Pig Bookstore in Shelburne, Vermont Bookshop in Middlebury, and the Book Nook. This weekend I went up and took them to the Book Nook in Ludlow, Vermont, Northshire Bookshop in Manchester, the Bennington Bookshop in Bennington, Bartleby's Books in Wilmington, Everyone's Books in Brattleboro, and I also you just want to read it. There are copies at the Fisk Free Library and the Silsby Free Library in Charlestown. So I've been doing a lot of traveling.
Yeah.
Getting my books
now,
out there.
You mentioned that you had a Facebook site. Do you have a website, too? Or?
Just a Facebook
just
site.
A Facebook. So what would
page.
that be?
That's In the Tall Pines
In the
on
Tall
Facebook.
Pines, which is the name of the book.
Yes, yes. And then I have an email for it. It's inthetallpines@gmail.com.
So if somebody wanted to, if they were on Facebook and they wanted to know more, they could just search out In the Tall Pines.
Correct. Yes,
on Facebook.
It's a page. And I'm almost up to 100 likes on Facebook now. I'm getting there.
It must be hard. I mean, I'm amazed that you wrote the book. First of all, I mean, how long did it take to write this?
I started in 2009, really.
And you finished in 2016.
2016.
So, I mean, that's a lot of work to write the book. Alone write the book, and then push through to get it printed, and now you're marketing your own work, and you're to be commended for that, because that's a lot of work. I don't know if I could. I don't think I could do it. I mean,
it takes some time.
Yeah. And then to be forward enough, thinking that there's a second and a third book that's going to be part of a trilogy. That's you've got an ambitious, a lot of ambition here.
Well, thank you. Yes. I had a book signing at Toadstool Books in Keene on February 9th, and they read the book, and they can't wait for the sequel. Because,
really?
It's coming up, but
the fort at number 4. I've gone over there a few times to see these reenactment things and stuff, and the way you write about the battle sounds a lot like exactly how these reenactors said those 18th century, 1700 battles, 1600s were fought. I mean, something happened over here, and then something happened over there, and it wasn't like you think of World War II, the German line marching forward. I mean, it was like these skirmishes, I guess is the word, right? And
they have quite a community of reenactors down there. I'd like to ask people to go to the fort at number 4. We kind of think about it, forget about it sometimes. You know? And they have a lot of events coming up. I think they posted one today about they're going to do a play down there with Sleepy Hollow, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and they're asking people to come down for auditions. But
I'm surprised that they're not promoting your book as well, because I know they're into historical accuracy, but it's I think it would be an opportunity for them to promote your book because don't they have a gift shop there? And
it's a bookshop down there. And,
I saw this. I'm trying to find it as we talk. Here it is. That the fort at number 4, they're having something coming up on June 2nd. Rising on the River, Culloden. It must be the Battle of Culloden. And then Living History Weekend is June 16th to the 17th. And then they have something called the Abenaki at the Trading Post coming up in August. Obviously, you're right. The Abenakis have been forgotten here, but there was...
Or not acknowledged.
Yeah, but there's always a group. I mean... a friend of mine I grew up with, Steve Luco. Do you know Steve Luco? He's an electrician in Claremont. His mother was an Abenaki, and his grandfather and his grandmother, and I remember his grandmother was this wonderful lady who was very Native American looking, and she and her sister would tell stories. They were two sisters who were storytellers, and I used to, he'd want to go play. I'd want to stay and listen to the old ladies talking because they were kind of neat. And well, that's not true. He enjoyed them too. But their father was this Abenaki Indian who was a guide on Lake Sunapee over at Blodgett's Landing, and there was a camp there, and he was into hunting and fishing, and you would go to the harbor and take a boat to dropped off, and you'd get dropped off at Blodgett's Landing. There was no roads, I guess, in those days that went to Blodgett's Landing, and he was this full-blooded Abenaki who was this? Now, where did you learn? You said you read, but I mean,
Well,
did you ever go up to Canada where there's the St. Francis?
St. Francis, no, I haven't been up there.
Oh, yeah.
I've been in contact. They have in Swanton, New Hampshire, there's a Abenakis.
Yeah.
But funny, when I wrote the book, I say, the Abenakis are gone. But really, they're not gone, because since I've written the book, I've been hearing from a lot of them that are still here in the States and have been.
Yeah.
They're kind of in hiding because
they're sort of under the radar. Yeah.
Well, there was a forced sterilization program in Vermont in the 1920s.
Wow.
And the way they've been treated by
in the 20s.
The government, they're kind of hiding right now.
I mean, it's 100 years ago, but that's amazing. It seems like
Ray saw me shaking my head because I'm, this country, we've not always been the best.
Well, not to Indians, certainly.
Yeah.
Not to Native Americans.
We've been kind of crummy to Indians.
No.
But I thought they were gone, but actually I've heard from a lot of them in New Hampshire and Vermont as well.
Good. Oh.
And they're still here. They never went anywhere. And I was surprised to learn that.
Well, this is great. Thank you for coming in. And
$7.55.
If anybody wants to see this book or buy it, you can go to the Violets or any local bookstore, but you can do it online and in the Tall Pines. And I imagine on your Facebook page there's probably information on ordering it as well, right?
Yes, there's links to all these stores.
Yeah.
And I want to thank all those stores for taking my book. Being an independent author, it's really hard to get out there and sell books. And I want to thank both of you for having me on the show.
No, you're
welcome.
Because it's great publicity for me. And I think the book's informative as well as entertaining, and people learn a lot if they do read it.
It's Andy Hopkins in studio talking about his book, In the Tall Pines, which Facebook page is In the Tall Pines. So you can go to facebook.com and search In the Tall Pines and learn more about that. Learn all about your past and your history, and if you're interested in reading the book, you can pick it up. Well, Andy, I appreciate it. Nice meeting you.
Well, same here, Steve.
Absolutely.
Right.
Something we didn't talk about is you dedicated the book to your grandfather. And I knew your grandfather.
You did?
Yes, I did.
That's what Dan told me.
I used to work in college at the woolen mill, and he was the fixer.
Dartmouth
he was the
Woolen.
guy who fixed everything, and whenever it broke down, he would come and Mr. Paps. And everybody called him Mr. Paps. I mean, he was a well thought of guy, and I knew I don't remember. I was a kid, but yeah.
He was an inspiration for me. Yeah, since I was born. He was a great fisherman over at Pleasant Lake. He used to catch a lot of salmon back when they were in the lake. And he was boss carter at the woolen mill for many years and good friends with the owners of the mills who used to come over fishing. But he was an inventor as well. Made an invention which increased woolen production quite a bit. They wanted him at the Swansea mill, but he wouldn't move. And when I talked to Steve Taylor, one of his sheep talks.
Oh, yeah.
He said that Dartmouth equipment was sold to Egypt and was still running. That was maybe 8 or 9 years ago.
Wow.
So just bring it back home that you
awesome.
dedicated the book to his grandfather.
And Dartmouth was the last woolen mill to go down.
It was. That would make sense.
Well, thanks a lot for having me on,
Oh,
Ray.
you're welcome.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's great to get you in here. And In the Tall Pines is the book. You can find again on Facebook. Search facebook.com In the Tall Pines. Ray, we'll talk to you next week.
Okay. Thank you.